Hi everyone, welcome back to my lab. It's Jody with another video, and today's video is going to be a review and demo of the Lime Crime Venus XL eyeshadow palette. I did purchase this eyeshadow palette myself. I've had it for a couple of weeks, and I do have my thoughts and opinions to share with you. If you're interested in those, then let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I wanted to mention is that I purchased my palette from ultabeauty.com for $56. I do understand that the brand has a little bit of controversy associated with it, and so I felt a little bit more comfortable making a purchase from Ulta Beauty. Also, alongside with the controversy, I am going to set that aside and focus on the product itself, so I will not be commenting on anything other than the quality of this particular palette. When you receive your palette, it comes packaged inside this plastic sleeve, much like the Venus 1 and Venus 2 palettes, and here is the outer packaging. It's a beautiful pink cardboard package with a magnetic closure. It does come with a very nice mirror inside, and here are your shades. There are 18 shades in this palette and 4 different finishes. You have your matte finish, your sparkle matte finish, your glow finish, which is really a cross between satin and matte, and lastly you have your metallic finish. Each pan inside this palette does come with 1.67 grams of product, bringing the total grams to just a little bit above 30. The cost per gram of this palette will come to $1.86, which is actually quite on the affordable end when compared to comparable eyeshadow palettes that I'll show you in just a little bit. So I've had this palette for several weeks now, and I've had the opportunity to try it and try a lot of the shades as applied to my eyes. I do have to say that when swatched, which I have a couple of swatches here on my arms, this one is the shade Passion, this one is Inspire, and this one is the shade Idolized. Passion, Inspire, and Idolized. When you swatch the shadows, they kind of feel a little bit dry to the touch. Not creamy, they just feel a little bit dry, honestly. But when applied to the eyes, which I have, and you'll see in my demo because I created a couple of eye looks for you, they apply beautifully and they blend really, really easily. And they're like full pigment on one swipe as well, so it's really, really nice. Maybe if you are able to find this palette in store, which I think they have it in store at like Bloomingdale's, just sort of don't let the swatches dissuade you because they're not really representative of how the shadows apply to the eyes. Now I did want to mention that I tried a lot of these shades. I think there's only a couple that I haven't actually tried on my eyes, and I have to say that the mattes, they have a tendency to kick up just a little bit of powder, although if you tap off your brush you have no problem with fallout when applying them to your eyes. The next finish was the Sparkle Matte, which are the shades Fresca and Celestial. I did use Fresca on my eyes today, and to be honest, the sparkle is almost negligible. You can see it a little bit, but definitely not to the extent that you see it in the pan. So for me, I will effectively be using those two shades more as matte shades. Again, there's a little tiny bit of sparkle that you see on your eye, and you'll see it when I do the demo of this look. Not anything like a true shimmer finish or anything like that, so I'll continue to use them mostly as mattes. The glow finishes, which are like the Passion here and the Idolized finish, those are supposed to be a hybrid between satin and matte. To me, they work more like a matte. They have a very velvety finish and they blend really well with all the other mattes, and so that's how I've continued to use them. The metallic shades are very pretty. They give you a lot of dimension on the eyes. I'm wearing Ethereal on my eyes right now, and like I said, it gives a very nice dimension, but it isn't like a bold metallic eyeshadow. You can foil them and achieve a more metallic look, but there's not really any shade in here that would be like a molten metal kind of shade. I would say the one that gives the most metallic effect is the Inspire shade when foiled. So I want to get into a few pros and cons with regard to the palette. So I'll start with the cons. One of the things is that the palette itself is quite bulky. It's really quite thick. You can see it's about the thickness of my finger, and I think that that's just a lot of excess packaging. I don't believe that the pans go as deep as the palette does, and so it's a little bit bulky. It's not heavy, but again, it's not something that would be useful to travel with. It's just a little too bulky in that regard. Another con that I would mention is that this palette is a very specific color story, and so so it's definitely in the pink rosy kind of tones. So if you enjoyed that about the Modern Renaissance palette, then this is something that you'll definitely enjoy. I did enjoy that about the Modern Renaissance palette, so the color story actually appeals to me, and maybe it might appeal to some of you as well, but I know that a lot of people have a tendency to believe that more rosy eye looks can make them look sick, and so if that's you, then probably you're not even looking at this or watching this review. Another con that I wanted to mention is that a lot of us have a habit of applying like an inner corner highlight with a shimmer shade. This palette doesn't have anything that can really be used like that. The ethereal shade is just a little too dark, at least on my skin tone, to be used that way. So if you have a deeper skin tone, then probably ethereal would work well for you in that regard. That's really it for the cons for me personally. I think that even though the palette itself is pricey, you are getting 18 shades, and again, the cost per gram is actually on the affordable side, as you'll see in a few minutes. So for me, the pros of the palette is that these shadows are so pigmented. They go onto the lid, and you can see, like, even on my skin tone, which is quite similar to, say, like the shade Scallop, even though this one is more pink, you can see the shade as soon as I apply it. It's really beautiful. The shade Blank Canvas is so appropriately named. It blanks out my eyelid really clearly, so that then when I go in with all the other shades, they just look really vibrant and they go over it really smoothly. So I've been using the shade to set my eyeshadow base. The shade Flora was the first one that I used. It's really nice. It gives you a sort of a more fluorescent look to your eyeshadow if you like that sort of thing. I really like this shade. It's really unique in my collection. I don't have too much like that. Another absolute pro to the palette is that I got very little fallout. You'll see with both of the demonstrations that I did my complete face makeup first, and then I went in with the shadow. I do tap off the excess off of my brush because when you dip, you do kick up a little bit of powder. I would say not as much as a Dose of Colors eyeshadow palette or as much as Lorac, but you would expect about as much as you would from maybe Tarte or Anastasia Beverly Hills. Then you would expect that amount of kick up, but again, tap off the excess off your brush and you don't have to worry about fallout. I really like that, and the blendability. So as far as the color stories, the most similar palettes in my collection, I did compare it to the Modern Renaissance palette. The Modern Renaissance palette has 14 shades at 0.7 grams each, so that brings the price to $4.29 per gram, which makes it quite a bit more expensive than the Lime Crime palette. And also you can see that shade-wise, the Modern Renaissance is going to give you a lot more options for neutrals, but the Lime Crime gives you a lot more options for the berries. Another thing I wanted to mention is the Modern Renaissance palette has a 6-month shelf life, and the Lime Crime palette has a 24-month shelf life, which is amongst the longest of any eyeshadow palette I have in my collection. Another eyeshadow palette that's very similar in color story would be the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette. You can see the Desert Dusk palette has a little bit more purple, and the Lime Crime one has a little bit more berry. So here are those two so that you can take a look. You can see that they have a lot of similarity. The Huda Beauty palette has 18 shades and a total weight of 25.2 grams, bringing the cost per gram to $2.58 as it retails for $65, and the shelf life on the Huda Beauty palette is 12 months. So in terms of price as well as lifetime, the Lime Crime Venus XL palette does perform a little bit better than the other two. I did also want to mention that this palette is vegan and cruelty free, and the vegan might be important to some people because I know that a lot of the red shades usually contain carmine for the pigmentation, and this one does not, being vegan. Now, one thing which I typically don't have to worry about, but I do want to bring it up, is that sometimes people have had reactions to eyeshadows that have red dyes in them. I've heard Risa Does Makeup mention that she had an issue even with the reds in the Modern Renaissance palette. So if you have had a reaction to any red colors, definitely look at the ingredients a little bit more closely and see if any of those might be some of the ones that may cause allergic reactions for you. I haven't had that issue, and so I didn't really have to worry about that. Okay, now I do want to break away so that you can see the two different eye looks that I created. One will be the one that I'm wearing right now, which is very easy, neutral, everyday kind of eye look, and the other one is a more evening appropriate look, which was very berry tone, and I loved that look so much. You all really liked it in my Wet n Wild foundation review. I was wearing this particular palette as well. So let's get into the demos, and I will be back with my final thoughts. Alright, so I primed my eyes with the MAC Soft Ochre Paint Pot, and I'm going to set that down with the shade Blank Canvas from the palette. And how appropriately named is that shade? I think it's like the exact same shade as the MAC Paint Pot. Next, I'm going to take the shade Scallop from the palette, which is surprisingly pigmented, and I'm going to take that onto my Wet n Wild brush, which I got from a brush set, but they sell these brushes individually now. And this one is just a really nice, fluffy blending brush. I was actually surprised at how much this shadow actually shows up on my skin tone. At this point, using the same brush, I went into the shade Flora. I would say that shade actually has the most pop effect. I was watching videos by Thrifty Beauty, and she mentions that each palette sort of has a pop effect where that's the shade that makes you buy the palette pretty much. Well, for me it was this one. It's like a salmon corally pink. In any case, I'm using the same brush for that, and I'm applying it just a little bit lower into my fake crease. If you're not new to my channel, you already know that I have hooded eyes, and so every time I do my eye makeup, I create a false crease a lot higher than my natural crease would be. Next, I'm going to go into the shade Aphrodite from the palette, and I'm going to apply that on the outer third of my eye. I'm using a Wet n Wild brush from that set as well. If I can find the corresponding numbers from the individual product list, I will put those on the screen so that you can use them for reference. This shade Aphrodite, it looks kind of like a rich brown, but at least on top of or alongside the colors that I'm using, it looks a little bit more purple or magenta toned, which I am not upset at all. And now back with the original Wet n Wild brush and the shade Flora, I'm just going to blend out the edges of that. I do know that I'm going to use this shade on my lower lash line, so I am extending it further out than like my wing liner would be. For a little bit of added depth with this shade, I'm taking a Morphe E36 and the shade Botticelli, and I'm just going to apply that just in the outer V of my eye, and I'm just going to pat that in. Next, I'm going to use a Morphe E19 brush, and I'm going to create somewhat of a half-cut crease where I'm going to apply some of this shimmer shades. So I'm just going to clean up on my lid and also create a sticky base for the shadows to go onto. For this, I'm going to definitely draw my crease above the folds of my eye. I do that to create an illusion of more lid space. So I'm going to put the metallic shades right where I put down that base, and for that I'm going to use a MAC 242 brush. I'm first going to go into the shade Ethereal, and I am going to apply this with a damp brush. I have really been enjoying dampening my brush with the Inglot setting spray, even more than the MAC Fix Plus, because it's a little bit more sticky, and I find that it really foils the shadows nicely. So I'm taking the shade Ethereal and I'm putting that on the inner third, and then I will use the shade Love and connect the two. So basically just go in the middle. It's actually really incredible how peachy the shade Love pulls when applied to the eyelid alongside all the other shades. So I'm going to use that on the same brush. Also dampen it with my Inglot spray and just apply that to the center. So hopefully you can see how nicely it brings out the peachiness in that shade. And now I'm going to take the shade Aphrodite and I'm just going to blend in the center here. So that's the eye look so far. I do like to go in and add just a touch of blank canvas just underneath my brow bone. I'm going to go ahead and work on the lower lash line, and for that, I'm going to use the Wet n Wild blending brush and the shade Scallop, and I'm just going to go underneath the lower lash line. So that one, as you can see, is not precise at all. And then with my MAC 221, I'm going to take the shade Flora, and I'm just going to go a little bit closer to my lash line. And now with the Zoeva 317, I'm going to line right underneath my lash line, but just on the outer third of my eye. Just to make sure it's softly blended, I'm going to take that MAC 221 brush and just brush it across where I just applied the Botticelli shade. I'm going to apply some of the Wet n Wild brow highlighter, and I'm just going to put that on the inner rim to just brighten the waterline. And other than that, to turn it into this, you just need a little wing liner and some mascara. So I'm going to apply that off camera and then show you the finished look. For this very simple look, I'm going to prime my eyes using my MAC Soft Ochre Paint Pot and a Zoeva 142 concealer brush. And I'm going to set that with the shade Blank Canvas from the palette and my Dose of Color shader brush. With the Zoeva 221 brush, I'm going to begin to mark out my crease with the shade Scallop from the palette. That's the soft matte pink. And with the same brush, I'm going to take the shade Idolized, and I'm going to again continue to define my crease, this time just a little bit lower down. Next, I'm using a Zoeva 224, and I am going to further define my crease, and this is the shade Burnt Gold. I'm keeping this color the lowest of all, and I'm also going to work it out into the outer V of my eye. Once you have the lid properly blended, take the shade Fresca on a flat shader brush. I'm going to apply the shade using a Zoeva 234 brush, and I'm going to focus it on the outer third of my eye. This shade does have a little bit of micro shimmer on it, but as you can see, it doesn't really translate too much. You can see a little bit of micro glitter, but not too bad. So if you wanted to use this shade in the crease, you totally could. Not that you can't wear shimmers on your crease if you want to, but most people use mattes in the crease, and so I think that this could be one that you could still use that way. Now on the other side of the same brush, I'm taking the shade Ethereal. And I pack that on the inner third of my eye. That is our eye look so far. At this point, I'm going to apply a little bit of wing liner. I'm using this one from Stila. It's going to be in the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty, and I'm thinking about picking up a backup. I have to say, I think that this is my favorite liner pen. Now I'm going to repeat all of the steps that I took for my crease, starting with Scallop on a Zoeva 221. After that, we use Burnt Gold on the Zoeva 224. And lastly, using a Zoeva 317, I'm going to line the lower lash line. To brighten my inner rim, I'm using my Rimmel London Kohl Kajal pencil. And finish off with mascara. And that completes the look. Alright, so hopefully you enjoyed both looks. Definitely let me know which one was your favorite. So all in all, I'm sure you can tell that I am actually really recommending the palette. I think it's really great quality, and if you enjoy a more berry toned color story, then I think that you'll really enjoy this palette. And at this price point, it's actually a very good price point, and the palette will last you a good long time. Just because of the things that I've heard, definitely if you're interested in the palette, I would recommend that you purchase it from Ulta Beauty. Then that way you can use your points or collect your points or anything like that. I hope you found this review helpful. If you did, please don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I do upload videos every single week, and I would love to see you in a future video. If you have any questions on anything regarding the palette that I didn't touch on in the video, then leave those in the comment section. Otherwise, I hope you're having an amazing day so far, and I look forward to seeing you again really soon on my next one. Bye-bye!